Hi everybody. In this video today we're going to be talking about basic page structure within an HTML page. This will serve also as a good review for folks who are working in the JavaScript class as well. So we'll sort of skip some of those pieces. Our key objectives today are to use the basic page structure and look at how to validate a web page. Those other pieces about CSS are going to come up in a different video. So the last time that we got together, we talked about putting headings in a page. And I'll take a moment to talk about these pieces right here. As a refresher, we know that a tag in HTML is denoted by these less than greater than signs, what we might call angle brackets. So this is an H1 start tag. This /H1 means that this is an end tag. And so the start tag, the content, and the end tag make up an element. And we can put together a page that only has this in it, open it in a browser, and it's going to show up. It's right, it works, but it isn't correct. It's not right, but it works. The reason for that is that browsers like to try to make these things work. They try their best to make something appear. And that's really nice when we are getting started or when things are simple. It works really well for a quick development. But as things get complicated and you're more specific about how you want things to turn out, it ends up complicating things because it hides problems or makes them appear somewhere different than we might expect. And so that makes it harder to identify where the problem might be. So proper page structure looks like this. Starts with that doc type, then there's the HTML element that starts here and ends here. Within the HTML element, there's a head and a body. We'll go through each line separately. So the doc type declaration. This one states that we're using HTML5. Notice that there is no 5 here. It just says HTML. Once upon a time, we had to denote exactly what version we were looking for and provide a link to where that standard was. HTML5 is the current standard, and it's what we call a living standard, which means that they're not planning to change where they're going with it. They're going to update it, refine it, but not start a completely new version of HTML. The next thing we get is this HTML opening tag. It starts the top level element, HTML, and that lang attribute, lang equals en, lets the browser know what language your page is in. En is for English. And then we get the head opening tag, and I want you to note that there's this indentation here. Okay, that's really important, and we'll look at that a little bit more before I'll go into a full description of it, but note that indentation, that's important. The head element holds information about the page. The next thing we add in is this meta char set, which means character set. Notice we've got the added indentation here. Meta tags can say a variety of things about the page. They're empty elements. There's no closing tag to them. Char set is the only one that we need to have, and it tells the browser what character set to use, and it's going to be UTF-8 for the purposes of what we are doing, and it's there to help protect against a particular attack that is rare, but it's worth having. Okay, the potential security vulnerability that can happen results to it. The next thing we're adding two things at once, this whole title element and this closing head tag. So the title element shows up in the browser tab, and now you can see how indentation helps us show which lines are inside which elements. So here we've got the head, and then the meta and the title are inside the head, and we can see that at a glance because it's indented one further. Okay, that's super valuable later on. We've learned before that HTML ignores white space. It doesn't care about that, but for the sake of reading your code, that indentation is really important. So the title, back to the title, the content goes into the browser tab. It also tells search engines what your page is about. So it's important information. And then we get the closing head tag here that ends the head element. And again, you can see how that indentation helps us see exactly what the structure of our document is. The next piece we're going to add is the body element. So we can see that the HTML element has a head and a body element. Okay? The body element is going to contain everything that shows up on the page. This page right now has no content, but it has space for content. And finally, we have the closing HTML tag, which finishes the page. So to review, we've got a doc type element and then an HTML element. And those are the only two top level items on the page. The HTML has two elements in it, a head element and a body element. The body has the content and structure for what's going to show up on the page, and the head tells us information about the page. For instance, it gives us this character set for UTF-8, and it gives us the title for the page to show up in the browser tab. And that is the basic structure of an HTML page. I want to show you next how to go and validate your HTML. So I'm going to very quickly bounce over to a browser here, and then we'll get going. Okay, so here I am at a Chrome browser, and I'm going to look for HTML validator. And the first thing that's going to come up is the W3C markup validation service. This comes directly from the World Wide Web Consortium, w3.org. And it's got 3 ways that you can give it information to test, to see if the validation is correct. So for instance, I can put in my own website here, mcleanonline.com, and click check. And it's going to go look at that website and look for any errors. And I do have a few because of some late changes I made for distance learning here. These can start to get a little complicated to see, but they'll point you to some problems when you run into them. For instance, this shows that there's no p element in the scope, but there's a p end tag from line 45, column 9 to line 45, column 12. So I'm going to look on line 45 to find that problem. And then it's got a couple of iframe things. These come from the code that Google provided in the Google Calendar for embedding a calendar. So those aren't really things that I'm going to try to change. I could fix this p tag to make that work. The other ways to check your code, or to give it code to check, is you could upload a file. I almost never find myself doing this. Usually what I end up doing is validating by direct input. So I'll go to my my file in Visual Studio Code and look at a particular page, and I'll just copy everything, Command C here, and then I go back to my browser and I say Command V to paste, and I check it, and it says document checked, no errors or warnings to show. So this structure is perfect. Initially, that's maybe not going to be very important, but when things get more complicated and you start running into troubles, running it through a validator can be a powerful way to have somebody else check your structure for you. And that gives us what the basic structure is and how to validate it with an external source. Thanks, everybody.